Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. So, yeah, I have been away a little bit from the camera as of late. I've been on a pretty nice vacation. So, I've been having a bunch of time off, and it's been great. So, today and then yesterday, but mostly today and a little bit last night, I uploaded a bunch of new videos and some. I just did a really cool interview segment for this really awesome locally made variety show, Lens. I had the amazing creators of that show. We did an interview on Monday. I just uploaded that last night. Really cool interview. I love I love doing the interview segments. That's my favorite aspect of this channel. For me personally, it's the most enjoyable thing that I get to do. I want to keep pursuing that, and I'm always thinking of new ideas. It's obviously a little bit more of a challenge to set up interviews because of scheduling and all of those things, but it's so worth it. It's so fun. I did two, well, within the last week or so, I did two interview segments. So both of those shows have been up. I just uploaded the most recent one last night. So check that out if you get a chance. Really interesting, and really the guests that I was able to have on the show have just been awesome. So uh, we did a show on Monday with Lenny Ari and Aaron Kirkpatrick, and then before that I had Dr. Heather Beers on the show. Super cool people, super interesting, and I love the variety and bringing some different perspectives to the table. From just different perceptions of films, different ways of looking at films. A lot of films also present to a degree some kind of social commentary on things, so it's always great. And then also just the creative aspects of films. So very cool. Check those shows out. Also we also just played a show last week or last weekend with Quantum at Hey Sailor, and I just uploaded that video. There was a camera crew there, so we were able to record the show. The show was recorded, the whole performance, both for both bands, the Button Men, and it came out really great. I was really excited. It was a really fun show. So I just uploaded that. I want to thank of all the folks that came out to that show, and it really means a lot for people to come out and support local music in general, of course, but especially when it's all like original music. And the music that both of our bands do, Quantum and the Button Men, is not really, I guess conventional. It's a little bit on the fringe, but yet I think both groups have definitely have an accessibility or an appeal to to reach even a bigger audience. But it's a little bit strange. It's a little bit off kilter. So, and it's all original music. So there's no familiarity to it for for the general public. So it's really cool. It really means a lot when people actually dig that kind of thing. So very cool, and it was all possible because of the awesome people at Hey Sailor, which is such a wonderful venue, probably the pretty much the best venue here on Mid Coast. So I love that place to death, and I've been fortunate enough to play a lot of gigs there this year and also last year. So today's show is on a movie I have never seen before. I went to Bull Moose. I've actually gone a few times. I've gone quite a bit, and I went the other day. I went on. Yesterday was Wednesday. We went up on Tuesday, and stopped in there, and that was really great. I went to the Bull Moose in Waterville, and before that I was in Bangor, and I went to the Bull Moose in Bangor, which is pretty much my favorite right now. They have such a great selection when it comes to grindhouse movies and exploitation movies. Waterville is, I don't know, it's not as good. I was able to still get some incredible movies, but their selection is really dismal when it comes to exploitation movies. I'm not sure what's going on. It used to be just incredible, and so, but it's pretty dismal now. But for their 4K releases, it's really good. But I don't have a 4K player, and it's not something I don't. I'm on the fence as far as if I want to go ahead and buy a 4K player, because I'm pretty happy. I'm really really happy with a lot of these Blu-ray editions that have been coming out. A lot of these boutique labels have been putting out. But I noticed the Bull Moose in Waterville had a really great selection as far as the boutique labels. They actually had a section in the store which I never noticed before, which was actually labeled boutique labels, and they had all of these really great exploitation movies, but they were all in 4K, much better than say their Blu-ray selection. But the Bull Moose in Bangor is pretty awesome. They have a great selection for Blu-ray and 4K in the world of exploitation. And when I was up there, I picked up this movie again. Most of the time, I pick up movies on a whim, and I have been really, really blown away by so many incredible movies that I have just discovered for the first time, and also sat down and actually watched for the first time. So super cool, super fun. And the movie that I bought, one of the movies I bought, was this really wild movie called Frankenstein 80. This movie is bonkers. It's a kind of an Italian exploitation version of the classic Mary Shelley tale Frankenstein. It's and it's just incredible. I got this movie Apple Moose. Never had never seen it before. It came out in 1972. It was directed by Mario Mancini, who was a pretty famous cinematographer in the world of horror exploitation. He did lots of work on some real, important movies in the world of exploitation. He worked. He was a cinematographer and worked with Mario Bava, who also in his own right a legend in Italian cinema. He did the cinematography. He was the cinematographer on Blood and Black Lace in 1964, and he's worked with Mario Bava before. And I believe this was his first movie as a director, and I had never seen this movie. And this movie is just bonkers crazy. It's such a cool and original tale or version of the classic Frankenstein story. And this Blu-ray is just incredible. There's so many great special features on here. I haven't finished it all as far as the special features. All kinds of great commentaries. There's like two or three commentary tracks. There's all kinds of interviews. There's a making of this movie. I had never heard of this movie, but I was just sold on, well, seeing what year this came out, 72. My favorite decade. Wicked old school grindhouse exploitation horror movie. It's super sleazy, really good practical effects. The Frankenstein monster is pretty fabulous. It's totally kind of off the rails. It's kind of a crazed movie. It's very sleazy. Just a great film, fun for the whole family. A good movie for the holidays, if you will. It's great. The packaging, the Blu-ray presentation of this film is just stellar. This was put out by Cauldron, which is a label I have never heard about before, which is yet again, another boutique label, exploitation label. They seem to specialize in all kinds of really obscure, weird movies from the 70s, and this being one of them. But this movie just totally kicks ass, and I love I love the discovery aspect of finding movies I have never seen before, and I came across this, and I was sold. Uh, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is definitely one of my favorite books of all time. I just recently started reading that again. That was, you know, probably as far as like the classic monster stories. What as a kid, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was probably the first book I ever read. The way I got into horror, and I've talked about it before in other shows, was when I discovered as a little kid the work of Edgar Allan Poe. That was what kind of got me into horror, and then shortly after that, I started getting into horror movies and watching them. And then also at that time, my mom is also a big horror movie fan, and so that was a big pivotal thing. We used to watch horror movies all the time together. The Friday 13th movies and Halloween movies, Nightmare on Elm Street, all of the early 80s kind of slasher films. And that was kind of my introduction. Evil Dead was another big movie that we would watch. So it was like culmination of that. And then I think the first kind of, iconic monster story or book that I ever read was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I believe I read that before reading Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I've always had a real deep connection to Frankenstein. I've always thought that the mythology is just super fascinating and interesting. The whole tale of Prometheus, the god who takes the power of the gods, essentially immortal being takes the power of the gods and tries to create his own gods in his own way, or his own through his own vision. And so I was always fascinated with that whole kind of mythology, and it's one of the greatest stories. The novel, I feel, is always so different than every film that has been adapted into Frankenstein. It's obviously from the classic Boris Karloff films to even the more modern ones. It's been all over the place. I definitely feel, as far as the source material, I haven't really seen a movie that is close to the book. I think the Kenneth Branagh version, which I haven't seen in a very very long time, I am interested in buying it and seeing it, starring Robert De Niro. I remember that movie being okay, but I also remember that movie being kind of a hard movie to take to a degree, because it's, I don't know, a little bit too, not pretentious, but it's so serious that, I don't know. There's something about it that makes the film not really particularly fantastic, but I remember being a really great film. And Kenneth Branagh, of course, a really great director, especially back in the day with all of his incredible adaptations of all the classic Shakespeare tales. But it is a movie I do want to see. But I really love, as far as the Frankenstein adaptations, Frankenstein vs. Dracula is actually one of my favorite films. I love the portrayal of Dracula in that, and that movie is so utterly ridiculous and terrible, but just so amazing, and it's kind of the epitome of just amazing grindhouse cinema. I really love that portrayal of Dracula and Frankenstein especially. And there's been all kinds of great Frankenstein movies over the years. A lot of interesting takes. And Frankenstein 80, which again it was my first time seeing, is I have to say is probably one of the best ones I've seen. And it's again, it's super low budget. It's on in some aspects it's such a terrible movie, but again, that's the beauty of exploitation, is they're so bad and terrible that they're good. And I think that this is an example of that. And the practical effects are really, really awesome. And I like that this film, well, Frankenstein in this film, Frankenstein 80, kills a ton of people. He just, the body count is kind of insane. And this film, I don't know, it's definitely like a slasher movie. I think it's much more in the vein of a slasher film. It's got the Frankenstein thing, and it's got the Doctor Frankenstein aspect, but and it's totally crazy and totally bonkers. Great practical effects, but it seems like the overall kind of aesthetic of the film feels and I think looks like a classic slasher film, which again is my favorite genre of all time. So I can't recommend this movie enough. It's super awesome, and it's right out of my favorite decade, the '70s. This came out in '72, and again, one of the things I'm always reminded by whenever I watch these great grindhouse movies is what they were able to do with their projects and with what these directors were able to do with their expression, you know, by predating so many American slasher films or horror movies that came out in the in the 80s, or 90s or even now, and they I feel they really pushed the envelope. Technically they had so many limitations as far as what they could pull off, but yet they were able to do it. And there's such a resonance with practical effects. And these films also have a real sleazy quality, which you don't really see in modern horror at all. They're all, I think, for the most part, there are good horror films that come out, but as far as the sleazier factor, you don't really see that anymore. Things feel a lot more sanitized now, and then also the overabundance of well, not practical effects. I wish there was more, but the overabundance of the jump scare, which is kind of like at the time when a lot of these great exploitation movies were coming out, it felt, the idea of what a jump scare was, for instance, it was a part of the movie, but it felt like when I watch a lot of these classic horror exploitation movies, whenever I see a scene of where, a character is in a dark room or walking in the woods and they're by themselves, and then suddenly the killer comes out to get them, or they believe the killer is after them and it's maybe another character, and there's kind of the setup for the traditional jump scare as to what jump scares are now. When I see that kind of setup in a lot of these films in the 60s and 70s and early 80s, it felt like when they do that, when they go into those areas, it feels really natural. It doesn't feel like to a degree ham-handed. It feels organic. It feels like a natural flow. It doesn't stand out as, oh, here we go, here's a jump scare, and it feels more. It overall feels more natural and organic. Whereas I think now with a lot of horror films, I feel like that aspect is used so much as a selling point by the company who is responsible for the movie or the creators. And I feel like when you get that kind of thing in a modern horror film, it feels like I don't know, almost like paint by numbers. It's like it just feels ham-handed. It feel like, and I also feel like you can see it a mile away. It can still be really intense and it can still be atmospheric and engaging, but it just seems like it has this real ham-handed kind of predictable, a very predictable quality to it, where you can just kind of see it coming, and like that was a big thing used in the most recent Omen film that I did a show on. That came out just this year. I saw it last week, the first Omen, and in so many ways that movie is really great, and it has a really there's just some incredible body horror in that film, and it's a pretty messed up movie in some ways, and it's really good in a lot of ways. But there are certain things about the film that I did not really like, that were I felt bad enough that it kind of took me out of the movie, and at the end of the movie I felt pretty unsatisfied, mainly centered on the ending of that film, and I did a review of that film. of the first Omen. Really good movie in a lot of ways, but it's a pretty mixed bag. And overall, at the end of it, I was kind of disappointed, especially with the ending. The ending is terrible. But that film also has these quote unquote jump scares. And they're cool at first, but by the time you get to the fourth or fifth jump scare, it's just kind of like, it just feels like it's just put in there and it doesn't feel natural anymore. And, with these classic horror exploitation movies, I feel like you never get that. It was just part of the fabric of the movie and where the story is naturally going. But anyway, I highly recommend this movie. This is a just a great piece of exploitation trash. Super fun. 1972, Frankenstein 80. Wonderful movie. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.